Welcome to Public Pedagogy. This is the podcast from the Peaks Lab. I am Sean. I'm joined as always by Matthew Kruger-Ross. As we said in our first episode, what we think is happening right now inside universities should be a public good and not something that is locked behind these paywalls and in languages that no one can understand. And Matthew, I think you and I would agree that as phenomenologists, we are very bad at this because of all the big phenomenology language. And so this is us learning how to do this a little bit better publicly. So every episode we sit down with a scholar and we ask them two big questions. Who are you in the academy and how does that work show up in the world? And in the end, we want to know how a scholar's big questions determine who they are in academia and in the public. And today we are joined by another one of my dissertation committee members. Thank you, Sarah, for being on my committee. This is Dr. Sarah Gulish. And Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Westchester, your role there, and who you are?
Sure.
Yeah, and your research,
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Sarah Gulish. I am assistant professor of music education at Westchester University. And this is I'm entering my fourth year at Westchester, but my second year as a full-time faculty member. And my role is a bit unique. It's a newly created position where all of my teaching centers on creativity and music. So I teach courses in improvisation and student-centered learning and progressive methods. And these are all required for our undergraduate music education majors. I was a public school teacher for 16 years, and a lot of what I'm teaching my undergraduates is what I did practically in the classroom, which is just super exciting. So I'm very, very happy to be there. And in terms of research, I really got interested in pursuing research and pursuing a PhD after I'd been teaching a few years and was mostly teaching adolescents. My job at the high school that I worked at was to teach every kid in the school in a creativity class, which is kind of rare. I've never heard of it happening anywhere else. So I co-taught with an art teacher, and we taught this course called Creativity and Collaboration. And the goal was to get students making. So whether it's through film or spoken word or visual arts or music, to really have every student sort of figure out what their creative identity is and then pursue that creative identity through tangible work. And I started to see this trend where all of these students who had so many creative capacities in music weren't being served by our music program. And that got me really interested in how do we engage learners at older levels. So in music, we do a lot of like how to help beginners who are in first grade and fourth grade, but there wasn't a lot of research on helping beginners who are past that point of entry. And I became really interested in how do I serve these adolescents? How do I serve adult learners? What are the best practices? And that really led me to pursue a PhD and start kind of digging into those questions and figuring out what was out there.
So I'm super curious about, you got your PhD, you're a professor now, and you've got your 16 years of teaching the public classroom. Which of those things do you think sort of counts the most in the academy? Like when you're speaking to people in academia, what's the thing that sort of gives you the street cred, I guess? Is it the 16 years in the classroom? Is it your PhD?
It depends on who you're talking about. I mean, I really think it depends on the venue and the person in the academy. If we're talking about students, it's those 16 years as a public school teacher. These pre-service teachers, they really want to learn from folks who have experience in the classroom. And so for them, like that's the street credibility. For folks at research conferences and music education, that doesn't matter. It's really about what journals I've been published with or not been published with. It's what imprints have picked up my work. It's really what I've done as a scholar that matters the most. And so, and I would say at Westchester specifically, what drew me to Westchester was that they really seemed to care about all of the facets of who I was. So I used to feel like when I went into academic spaces, I had to do a lot of pretending. Like I have to pretend I wear a suit. I have to pretend that I speak really intelligently and use big words. I have to pretend that, I enjoy flexing all of my credentials. and that's not who I am. And when I got to Westchester, they loved the fact that, you know, I play in a rock band and I'm out there performing and recording. They love that I taught kids for so many years. They love that I run a publishing company. I didn't feel like I had to tampen any of those identities down. But I do think in academia in general, that's not the case.
Mm. What made you want to add researcher to your identity? And researcher in the like formal academic
Yeah,
sense.
I didn't really.
Right?
And to be honest, I mean, just yesterday, I had a conversation with, I co-authored a book through Oxford University Press that came out last year. And as I was writing it, I said to my co-author, never let me do academic writing again. Like, I'm swearing right now, never let me do it. It's so hard. It's you know, but then
different.
curiosity strikes and I see a research study in front of me and I think like, well, who's doing this? I have to be the one to do it. And so I think what led me to research was curiosity and wanting to figure out how to best serve students. And if I'm spending any time as researcher, whether it's designing studies, you know, executing studies, writing up studies, it's just for that. It's because I want kids to be impacted positively. And if I don't think that there's going to be a great impact from the work, then I typically will step away from it.
Do you find yourself sort of chasing like a big question, or is it really about like what's just going to be the most impactful in my study?
Yeah, I do think I'm chasing a big question. So once I started working on my PhD, I got really interested in the concept of informal learning. And in music, we have a researcher out of the UK, Lucy Green. She was sort of the pioneer of studying informal learning. She did a lot of phenomenological research, looking at how musicians learn music outside of school settings. And then that prompted an entire curriculum that was based out of the UK called Musical Futures that implemented some of these ideas into more traditional settings. And that really impacted me. And so I did a lot of studies replicating what she did in Philadelphia, specifically in the music scene that I was a part of. And then looking at my students, which was my PhD research, and looking at student-centered learning in the context of how students approach learning music without a teacher present. And so I think what I've learned over the years is I'm really interested in student agency and autonomy. And I see the arts as a powerful vehicle for that. And so my questions always come back to that. How do we promote creativity to give students that sense of autonomy and agency? And even just this past year, the research that I've been working on has to do with improvisation and confidence. And we were looking at our students at Westchester and their confidence in creating musical ideas at the beginning of a course versus the end of a course. And that's the kind of stuff that gets me excited to get up in the morning when I see, okay, there is tangible good coming from this experience students are having. And it doesn't stop with a course. It's something that will impact them in every area of their life. And so I think those two ideas, autonomy and agency, are kind of the central questions that I keep coming back to.
And what I love about those, and Matthew, be curious if you agree or not, are that those are two things that I think are not necessarily measurable on like a scale or a test, right? Like I'm sure that there are some quantitative measures for those kinds of things, but what evidence are you finding of I guess I don't even know, is improvements the right word, or is growth, creative growth?
Yeah, is it development? Is it
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting from this past year specifically, I was working with a dear friend of mine, Dr. Marissa Gariello, who is at UT Austin. And so we co-created a couple of studies using students in my improvisation class at Westchester University. And what's kind of cool about that is the reason I met Marissa is because I designed a research study using her students when she was in the classroom who were doing creative work in their music program that was a bit non-traditional. And so we both have had this passion for, looking at creativity well before we were either professors. So looking at these studies, there was a couple different studies that we did. One was just looking at students' self-efficacy when it comes to improv at the start of a semester and the end. And I think what I should say, to give some context, is that a lot of our music education programs are very top down. So teacher driven, large ensemble programs where I, the teacher, tell you what to do and you do the thing I tell you to do. There's not a lot of student choice. There's not a lot of autonomy that happens. And so these are the students that we have coming into our undergraduate program. They are the best of the best in their ensembles, but they have not had many opportunities to have creative choice. And they want to be right. And so when you say to them, okay, we're going to be doing this exercise, but you have choice, a lot of them will completely freeze because there's no objective right or wrong. And so in this course specifically, we are looking at their feelings of self-efficacy when it comes to improv at the beginning of the course and at the end after doing all of these different activities. And we were pretty amazed at the growth. And since Marissa was conducting the study, she was able to deal with all of the student data without me necessarily intervening. So we were able to have kind of that objective perspective, but it was pretty transformative to even read their comments at the end and just what impacted their growth. And most of it had to do with environment, and both peer environment, but then also like instructor created environments. And they talked a lot about how it compared to environments they've had in the past. So we're still writing that up. And then we also did another study where we looked at if a student's self-perceived creativity matched an outside judge's perceived creativity of their improvisation. And it didn't, which we thought was really interesting. But
That's interesting.
It was cool to see that a student's self-efficacy did correlate with their sense of how creative they thought their improvised solo was. So there was a sense that like student confidence does give them a sense of pride and joy in the process of creating, whether or not objectively a musical expert deems it as creative.
Right. Like it's still working for them regardless of the
Right.
creative judgment. Yeah. That's
Right.
Go ahead,
Exactly.
Matthew.
Am I allowed to ask about methods? Because I'm fascinated by the kinds of designs and methodological tools you're using to collect data.
Sure.
What?
Yeah.
You dropped like phenomenology as like one of the inspiration, and I mean, and Sean and I are card carrying members. But are you adopting specific kinds of qualitative methods? I heard you mention self-efficacy. Are you using like self-efficacy scales?
Yeah.
What kinds of methods are you using in your studies?
We adapted. So this is a quantitative study. I'm a qualitative researcher. All of the research I've done in the past has been case study oriented or phenomenological. This is sort of, a new territory for me as a researcher, and it's part of why I'm collaborating with Marissa. But we took a study that had already been done in our field that had to do with creative self-efficacy, and we took that measure and adapted it to work for our students. So a lot of the questions were just Likert-based scale, where a student would have to rate their confidence in different aspects of creative musicianship. And then there was just space for comments at the end, just, to add to some of the data. And what I think is cool is every student has to take this class their freshman year. So these were all first year music education majors. And there was 80 students in the course and 60 elected to participate in the study. So we got a really robust group of students. And I think what might be interesting is replicating it with future years and seeing if we see anything different.
How does that feel to be someone who is so like, qualitative research, and then all of a sudden you're doing something very quantitative? I can speak from my own experience. It's hard. The hardest class I took at Westchester was the quantitative methods class, because it was not a philosophy I necessarily agreed with all the time, and it's just not a way that I think about things. Yeah. So tell me about that. How did that transition feel?
I mean, I love human stories. I love having people, I love interviews. I love coding interviews. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Moth. It's a first person storytelling event that happens all over the country, but I am like a
Yeah.
card carrying member of the Moth. And I think we get so much richness from hearing human experience. And too often we're boiling down ideas
Mhm.
and big concepts into numbers that don't always serve the profession, in my perspective. So I say all that to say that I've always been drawn more toward qualitative methods. For this, I think there's some power in quantitative data, especially because, this is a new course that's been adopted by Westchester, and no other university that I know of has this as a required course for their undergraduates in music education. And so I think there could be some power there to show we already have these gaps. We already know that teachers don't feel comfortable with creativity in music education. There's been tons of studies showing that, but we don't have a lot of methods showing what could work, right, to grow teacher confidence in leading improvisation activities or improvising themselves. So I think in this case, this is language that administrators and universities can speak. And I think there's power in that. But yes, I have to crack open my statistics for people who hate statistics book. I have to do a lot of digging back into, the trenches of my PhD brain because it doesn't come naturally to me.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting too. Like I do want to point this out that you're speaking about music, you're speaking about an art, and how the I'm thinking back to when you're talking about the musicians who were excellent at their craft, but then when asked to do something creative, it was like a struggle for them, right? And it just brings me back to I was not an arts teacher. I taught science, and I taught a class in like a makerspace, a STEAM class. But I could see the exact same thing. The kids who were such great science students who could do, who could follow the experiment, who could do the data collection and analysis and whatever, would go into the makerspace to do a open-ended engineering project where it's like, yeah, build something that's interesting and creative, and just have such a hard time with it because there was just not enough sort of constraints on the project. And and I just want to point this out, that like this idea of creativity is not, to me, necessarily just a music, just an arts, just a that kind of thing. Like this is something that exists across the spectrum of different ways of thinking.
One of my favorite books is called Intention: Critical Creativity in the Classroom. And they do such a great job. The authors, Simon and Burball, they connect this creative thinking to every subject and give a lot of context for how we think about creativity, how we assess creativity, how we design creative experiences so students can be successful. And I agree, it's not just music. And I think that's what gets me excited about the topic of creativity, is it really kind of infiltrates every aspect of the student's life. And I'll have students tell me that, after they do a songwriting project in my class, and they'll say, I'm like noticing this about the world, or I'm listening to these things differently, or I was outside and someone said this thing and it sparked a story idea in me and I wrote a poem. And you just see them embracing creative practices in general. And that's so exciting.
And I think the Moth is a good place for that too. I think you get a lot of stories from the Moth, like you said, like that. And I want to take this second to say, Sarah has an amazing Substack. You should read some of the stories that Sarah shares on her Substack, which we'll of course include those links in the show notes.
Sean.
Yeah, put the link to. It strikes me, or it seems to me, and as a bit of a way of transition, that unique for your role in your field and in as a professor, that's maybe slightly different than some of our colleagues who are also researchers and teachers at universities. But my hunch is you, and based on your background, have maybe a unique ability to do like the code switching that has to happen when you speak to members of the public, right, or parents or little ones, about some of the ideas that are are swirling in your head, and the research that you do, and how you show up for a class of undergrads is different than how you might show up in front of a community group. My hunch is that you may be a bit better at that than some of our colleagues. Would you agree? What do you like?
I mean, maybe. I think I've spent my life with teenagers, and so they're still my people, and in so many ways, I feel like a college freshman is not so different from a high school senior, and so when I'm teaching my undergraduates, it doesn't feel all that different in how I would have taught my students at Lower Moreland, just because I think, there's just so many similarities there. I do think that, so I will say that when I first started out as a teacher, I tried so hard to be the smartest person in the room and to cause separation between me and students to gain their respect, as a 22-year-old in front of a bunch of teenagers. And I was downright mean sometimes. And I remember a couple students calling me out on being sarcastic or being too abrasive, and realizing, what is a community killer? What is a creativity killer? It's not creating a kind environment or a welcome environment. And so I really feel like in terms of my teaching persona, I did a 180, and now I strive in any conversation I have. So this is kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but there's a community music researcher out of the UK. His name is Lee Higgins, and he talks a lot about this idea of the welcome in community music spaces, which is this unconditional acceptance of everyone in the space. And how do you build that actively? Because it doesn't just happen by accident. And that really transformed my thinking into every space I go into, I have to be building the welcome, because I have to create vulnerability and openness for people to feel like they can do the same. So with my undergraduates, I strive to do that. But even in giving a research presentation, if I want folks to let their guard down to receive information, I need to be able to do the same. So I think that translates to me being, I hope, vulnerable in front of people, being who I am. And so in some ways, I feel like I do less code switching than I used to, where I really try to be myself in any space and allow others to just be themselves.
Yeah, but I hear exactly what you're saying, though. It impacts how you show up, and then how you help to co-construct that conversation in that environment. Sorry, I'm supposed to be shifting to more accessible language, and I'm using big words. The way that you are and the way that you talk with others, your point is, no, I need to lower the barriers. I need to make the space where people feel safe and welcome. I love that. We're building the welcome. Because how do you kill creativity? How do you kill community? Right? You come in swinging a big stick, and or you know what I mean?
We talk about that in my classes. We go through like, what are classroom community killers? And we just list them all up on the board. And it's really interesting to hear students' experiences. Some of them are very subjective, things I wouldn't have thought of, but there's a lot of commonalities there. And, I think early on in my academic career, I really felt like I had to prove myself in so many ways, whether it was, through getting published by certain imprints, or again, like presenting at certain conferences. And as more time goes by, those are not the measures that make impact in the field. The measures are connecting with humans and creating change, or giving people permission to do the thing they were scared to do. And so that never happens because someone thinks I'm impressive. That happens because people feel like I have something to offer in terms of support or inspiration.
Well, I think that's, we talk about the code switch, talk about the public good of the university, and you've done all this amazing research about creativity and self-efficacy and all these things. So how do you then go about taking that to either the teachers or the districts or whoever? Like, how do you take that research out of the journals, out of the conferences, and into the public?
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I try to do as many workshops and hands-on stuff with kids as I can. I try to get in a lot of classrooms. I have so many teachers in the Philadelphia School District that are doing incredible things in their rooms, and they'll bring me in to do workshops on songwriting or improvisation, which I absolutely love. But in 2019, I started a publishing company kind of as a response to the inaccessibility of what I felt were academic presses. So kind of rewinding back from that, I got my first book contract in, I think, like 2015 or 2016, and was just kind of shocked at how poorly structured these academic press contracts are. There's not a lot of, speaking of agency and autonomy, there's not a lot of it for the author. You don't get paid much. Royalties are at like 2%, 5%.
Yeah, people do not understand.
No advances or very small advances, no marketing support, and you lose the rights to all of your work. And I was appalled by this. And my colleagues were like, no, that's typical. That's normal. And so
you just go with it.
Yeah. And so I had a book that was coming out. Again, this is, I think, 2016. And I said, hey, can we have like a link online for some materials that teachers could adapt? And they were like, yeah, we just don't have capacity for that. So I was like, you know what? Let's just start our own thing. So in 2019, I started Flat Books, which was a digital first publishing company with just the goal of, hey, let's make this more equitable. Let's give money to authors where it's due. Let's let people retain their rights to their work. Let's make things digital and interactive. And what I thought would be just like a pet project with a couple of books has turned into a very big monster. We're celebrating 7 years this week, and we've put out over 200 resources.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
Wow.
And with authors all around the world. We've given, hundreds of thousands of dollars to authors. And it's been a really incredible journey. And I think what I've learned through this experience is the folks I was first trying to reach out to, which were folks in academia who were doing work. And I said, hey, publish with us. Like, put your ideas out, make them accessible to teachers. What really resonated was folks who were in the classroom doing the work, creating resources and materials. And so, we've done a lot of that work through curriculum development. We've also started a children's book imprint so that we can have stories that can bring some of these concepts into the classroom for younger kiddos. And then we also have a professional development platform. So all of these ideas I'm talking about, we have workshops on them, and teachers can access them and learn more about, how to create or how to use technology in creative ways, or to make, groove-based materials for their classroom. And we have, I think, to date, over 80 creators in our network that do both creating books and professional development. So I would say that's where I'm trying to break down those barriers.
That's amazing. Are those
creators?
On your vision? Go ahead, Matthew.
I would say, was this ever on your vision board? Like, did you ever like on your
it's
your
still
vision
not
board?
On my vision board.
This is Sarah. This is nuts. Sorry to break character, but this is really cool.
No, it's cool.
Still not on my vision board. This is why I have to speak it out loud. So I'm like, this is good.
Yeah.
I am, again, like, very proud of the work and excited for the work, but it is work. It's been a hard journey. And I just think that that's worth saying, because there are some things that we pursue professionally because we think they matter, but there's still a lot of barriers and it's still hard. So no, it was never on my vision board, but similar to research, it came about because of a gap. And I think, a lot of what drives us in academia is just seeing where those gaps are and trying to find ways to fill them.
Who are those 80 creators? Are they musicians and teachers, or are they also academics, or is it just a big mix?
It's a big mix. Most of them are practicing K-12 educators. We have quite a few professors of music education and on our roster. We have artists who, are working artists, teaching artists, folks who are in arts admin. It's very varied across the board. That's amazing.
So it really is like you have created an academic journal that is for the public, for public consumption. And practical consumption, right? For teachers. Like, that's amazing. You have a thought, Matthew?
This is one of those conversations, Sarah, where I'm gonna have to like go sit and look around in the air and like think a bit, because you've kind of just like reorganized my brain.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah. I think
Wow.
one other thing that I can say about FLAP books and the different kind of spaces that we occupy is there's a lot of, and I'll just say this for anyone listening who's in academia, there are a lot of barriers in getting work out there. Some of them are constraints of time. So you might, by the time you publish research or you publish a book, it might be outdated, right? Because things take so long. And so I think when we look at innovating in sharing ideas, just like you are with this podcast and you are through Substack and all these different ways, the timeliness factor is one that I think about a lot, not to rush into sharing ideas, but to consider, does it need to take as long as it does? And if not, like what are ways that we can reduce that friction between getting valuable information and then putting it in the hands of teachers?
And
we know this well. One of my favorite academia stories right now is that Matthew and I wrote a piece on an AI piece, and we found out 250 days later that it was rejected for being too old. Yes.
Yep.
250 days old. Yeah. Oh, man.
I've been there too. Many rejections. Yep.
And that's why, like, it's so interesting to me to hear about your publishing company, but also just to see this. I think that's a reaction that a lot of people in the academy are feeling right now, is because we're seeing more like Substacks pop up or podcasts pop up or Instagrams pop up, like those kinds of things. I think people are frustrated that the research that they spend a lot of time and energy on is not getting out there because the journal pipeline is just so slow and with so many barriers.
Yeah. So before I was in higher ed, but when I was running the company, I had someone from Kent State University reach out and they said, can we do a partnership and can we publish our master's projects through you? They're so good and they're so rich and a lot of them are curriculum based, but they just sit in a folder on our servers. And so that was my first taste of working with the university to have the professors there curate. So it's not just saying like any old idea will do in any shape or form, but we as the professors and advisors, we're going to curate projects that we think are really impactful. We're going to make sure that they're ready to go. And then you can be the platform form and the voice piece. And some of those projects from Kent State are still the ones that sell the most because they are on such impactful topics. And I think that's a great reminder that we shouldn't just let things sit in a Google Drive. When graduate students are doing all of this fantastic work and even undergraduate students, let it live somewhere. And, I think finding that space has to really represent what the end goal of the project is. And if the end goal of the project is, in our case, K-12 education, we have to ask ourselves, where are these educators living? Where are they consuming content? Where are they getting their resources? And how do we get into those spaces?
God, Sarah, before we even hopped on, we were saying how simpatico we are. And literally that sentence you just said is the tagline for this whole project. Is literally what you just said. Is we are all of these in many ways are like our passion projects. They're what we care deeply about. And we know because we've seen them either ourselves or we've done it ourselves that they make a difference. And we want to figure out ways to communicate with others about it and show others like, hey, this is really cool. What have you thought about doing it this way? Have you thought about trying it this way? Or my friend over here is doing X. You should really connect with them. And maybe the two of you, that's what we're trying to figure out is how do we move and act in this space with the tools we have, with the AI we have, with the...
So, Sarah, I'm going to give you your soapbox right now. Funding for research comes from all kinds of places, right? All different places. But some of it also comes from like, tax dollars or whatever. So tell us why random person on the Westchester sidewalks should care about your research and their money going to support your research?
That's such a good question. I will say this is the first year that I did some delegation work down in DC for music education advocacy, and had a chance to do a fly-in in May and sit down with policymakers and make a case for arts education funding. And with that, very similarly, research into best practices and why we're funding it. I think that there are so many benefits to arts education that I could cite. And right now, specifically with where the world is, we just see the need for spaces where students' social emotional learning is at the center. And all of those 21st century durable skills that we look at becoming more and more necessary because of AI and because of, the need for students to use creative thinking and rumination, finding ways to implement not just any old version of a curriculum in the classroom that addresses that, but really, evidence-based practices is more important now than ever. And so that's why I think we should continue to fund it.
It's great. Yeah. And we
Plus,
fully
music
agree.
is fun.
Yes.
Music is fun.
Music is fun. Everyone should play an instrument.
Yeah. Well, like we said earlier, like this creativity idea goes beyond the arts too, and I think the arts is a great place to practice it, but it goes beyond. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah, where can people find your work and your writing and find you?
Yeah. So you can find out more about my company, F-Flat Books, fflat-books.com. We also have a podcast called Musiccast that's community run, where we talk about a bunch of different topics in music education and arts education. I write sarahgulish.substack.com, and also my website sarahgulish.com has links to my creative work as a songwriter, artist, and all of the different things that I do.
You're just so freaking
Sarah,
cool.
thank you so much for coming on.
Can't stand it.
Say it louder for my kids. Where are the kids?
I'm dead serious. Oh, gosh. Sean, you got a great committee. Just saying.
Oh, yeah. I'm well aware. I
committee.
lucked out.
You got a great. Sarah, I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So I got a pretty good dissertation committee between Sarah and Megan, right? Our first two episodes. They're great.
All I have to do is step back, right, and let y'all be y'all. It's fantastic.
Well, it's just amazing how we are on the same wavelength for so many things. I mean, like Sarah clearly feels the same way that we do of like the research that's being done in universities is so incredible, and it just gets locked into this tower and forgotten about, or just like kept secret for whatever reason. And it just should not be that way.
So maybe part of it is not necessarily that we don't know how to communicate about it. I mean, I do think that's part of it, but maybe there's also like, how do we work within the systems that we've got and the reward and punishment sort of structures that are set up to share about it. I mean, for Sarah, she looked around and said, I'm not seeing what I need. I had this experience in publishing, and I'm not looking around and seeing what I need. Why don't we just start one ourselves?
Well, that's what she said. The system doesn't work for me.
Yeah. And
she said the system does not work, so I'm going to make my own.
I'm going to make my own, and then I'm going to bring in others and think of just blown away.
Yeah.
It's the definition of, if you don't like the table, turn it over and make a new table.
Well, I think too, like, we talk about with the way that the landscape works right now is that the things that get funded, the things that people care about, the things that are, maybe I shouldn't say people care about, the things that get traction are the things that are easily measured. I can show you the graph that shows this. And phenomenology is not that thing, right? Phenomenology is the exact opposite of that, right? And to hear her talk about creativity, self-efficacy, things that are also just like not easily graspable on a graph, not easily statistically graspable, and how she has found ways to make it very apparent for the classroom that those are important, and to actually go to Washington D.C., right, and to advocate for arts education that way. She has found ways to translate this difficult to grasp research into really meaningful impact in the classroom.
Oh, and it's being strategic about how you communicate. Like she said, she values, which I think we're in agreement with, the story, the narrative, the cases, the individual cases. But in different spaces and in different ways, it is more beneficial to be able to say, I can show proof. I have measurement and numbers that we started here on the bar graph. We started here and now we're here, which is, right. I think I struggle with that as a, qual phenomenologist, philosophy person. But sometimes in those spaces, that's what's needed strategically.
Yeah. And I think that the problem that I have with it is that it's just so abstract. It takes it away from the context of the thing.
She said it. It's
and I think but I do wonder. I should say I do wonder. She. This is actually before we even started recording. We were talking about the, how I think that there is a taste right now for humanity, right? Like the. Do you know what I mean? Like people are a taste.
Is a fantastic.
Okay, less
band name,
less cannibalistic.
A taste for humanity.
But I think that the AI of it all makes the quantitative stuff really simple and easy, and it's everywhere. Like you could, but I don't necessarily need to. I don't need to read a journal article that shares quantitative data anymore, because the AI answer to that is a one sentence thing that says, yes, the data says this. But the human stories are not something that can be replicated that way. And so I think that there is a taste for, or a desire for, more of those human stories. And
like a yearning.
That's where I think the qualitative stuff and the phenomenological stuff is going to be a step forward for those things. And how I've always felt is that phenomenology and science are two things that complete each other and have to coexist. And I think that what's interesting to me is to hear her talk about, she did this quantitative research where they were able to use these measures to gather information about self-efficacy and how it's coming from these different classroom practices. But that's not all. That is one phase of her research, but other parts of her research are qualitative and phenomenological, and she's able to take those things and turn them into chunks of impact. Yeah.
It's also nice hearing in parallel folks asking similar questions, poking around in similar areas, but reframe some of the things that Sarah shared about starting with informal learning and looking at agency and autonomy and creativity. There's a version of that could be translated into exactly what we're looking at. What's it like to be,
what we do,
like the experience in the room, in the classroom, formal, informal. That's a version of what you're doing, right? Getting out into the world and you're with your dissertation study. What's that kind of learning look like, and what is learning? What do we do with that?
Do you think if she hadn't started with 16 years of classroom practice and she went straight into academia, do you think she would be feeling this way about how to translate, how to code switch, how to get starting a publishing company to get the stuff out there for classroom teachers? I wonder how much that aspect of her career comes into play, because it's the same for me. I had 10 years of teaching experience now coming into this. It's and you,
I guess. Yeah, I guess we all, the three of us, fit the going wisdom that you need to be in the classroom. I think we would have gotten to where we are eventually, but our backgrounds and our experiences make up the credibility that we have, and we're able to speak to others about. Right.
Yeah.
And that no matter how high in the clouds I can get on phenomenology, I always have to remind myself, could I talk about and explain this to one of my colleagues who I know is an expert pedagogue and never has read any of these things? And if I can't do that in something, then I need to come back and touch grass.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? So pull for her. It's kind of refreshing though and I hope folks who are listening or who are hearing us talk, like, if I could give this all up, I would go back and be what I think is a real teacher in K-12. I don't know the real, you know what I mean? I think real work's happening there. But it's the way we've structured academia and lives and school systems means there's like a way out. There's not a way back in. God, I wish we could. That's why I love like a lab school.
And I just
like a half.
And I just think that like the fact that there is teaching experience there makes it easy to translate the difficult scholarship. And it's like I've said before, like there are things now that I've understand the scholarship and I've gotten into the research, I look back at my teaching and I'm like, oh, I could have done that so much better.
I know.
I could have done that so much better. So, but that's what we're here to figure out, is how to make this stuff more translatable and get it into the public hand. So that is it for episode 2 with Sarah. Yeah, thank you for spending the time with us. If you want more of this, everything we do, you can find on our website, peakslab.org. Matthew and I also write on Substack about teaching and learning. We will put all the links for Sarah's stuff because she does great work. You can find all that stuff in the show notes. If something in this conversation stuck with you, then pass it on, please. We'd love to hear. We'd love to hear about what you think and what other people are thinking about it. In the meantime, consider giving us a rating and a review. And thanks again. We'll see you next time on Public Pedagogy.
Thanks, Sean.